Well, good morning. How are you guys all doing today? You guys all warm and snug? Just a tad bit cold out there, isn't it? All right. It is fun stopping in the snow, I agree. So we're in the story of Ruth. We're going to get right into it. We're actually going to close up the story of Ruth today, okay? We're in Ruth chapter 4. All right, if you guys do have your Bible, I know some of you guys have your Bibles. I like it when you guys follow along, and everybody else, I like it when you guys all follow along too. This has been a really interesting story, but one thing I want to notice, or that I want to point out this time, actually I'll ask you guys, has there been any extraordinary miracles happening in the story of Ruth? Can you guys think of any? Has there been a single miracle? Anyone that you can think of? No, there hasn't, right? So there's nothing really extraordinary happening here. We don't really see God's extraordinary hand of miracle. What we are going to see, though, once I finish this chapter, is I want to show. You don't really see much of God in this story, but once I'm going to finish it up, I'm going to show you guys exactly how God was involved from the very beginning all the way to the very end. So in Ruth chapter 4, here we go. So actually, just to recap where we were at last time, Naomi gave Ruth a little bit of bad counsel. She said, listen, it's time that you find somebody to marry. It's time that you find a home. She knows that Boaz, okay, is a very close relative of her dead husband. So therefore, he would be what's called a guardian redeemer. And what's a guardian redeemer? Anybody know?
Someone who marries someone because they're like their nephew or something because their husband dies.
Exactly, yeah, you're right about that. So he would be kind of like the next in line. So it was an obligation to a close family member to then take care of the family, sometimes marry them, take care of them and take care of their estate. So Naomi did recognize that was Boaz. Boaz was very kind and very safe towards Ruth from the very same day he met her. And so Ruth actually came and approached him. Wasn't exactly in the best scenario, and Boaz said, and she basically said, you can marry me if you want to. And Boaz says, you know what, I'd love to, but there is somebody closer than I. So he's actually quite honored. He says, there's actually some younger guys they're a little bit more qualified for me, but I really appreciate that. So Boaz actually does want to marry Ruth. And so what he does in this chapter is he knows that there is the closer relative in the area. And so what's going to happen, we're going to see kind of a real estate transaction, okay? So Naomi's back because remember her family left and they went into Moab. And so some of her husband's land is now for sale. So Naomi's too old to run the land. She doesn't have anybody that can work for her or anything like that. So she's going to basically short sell her property, probably at a very good price too. And so I imagine what's going to happen here is that the close relatives of Naomi, they're going to be bidding for this property. And so Boaz is going to be initiating that. So in the beginning of this, we're going to see Boaz, he has the intention to marry Ruth. That's what he wants to do. Yes, he'll probably buy her land, but he's not really motivated by buying the land. He's got land. He's a very established businessman. He's got money. He just had a really good harvest. So he doesn't really need the land as much. He's actually really interested in pursuing a relationship and marrying Ruth. And he's okay with, because right away that means he's going to be taking care of his new mother-in-law, essentially, as well. So it starts off right here in chapter 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. So it doesn't even mention what the guy's name is. We don't know exactly how close in line he is to Ruth to Naomi and her family. But he is the guardian redeemer that's just a little bit closer in relation. So he'd be the person that's kind of in first position, so to speak. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert about real estate, but when you want to buy a house, okay, what you want to do, if you really want to buy this house, you want to be in first position. Okay, it's really important that you're in first position. Right now, Boaz is in second position. So he's got a pretty crafty way. He's not going to do anything dirty or cheat this year, but he's got a pretty crafty way. He knows how he can get into first position. Right now, the closer relative is in first position. Boaz is in second position. Okay, so he says, hey, come on over and have a seat here, buddy. And so what Boaz does is this. He says, Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. So what he's doing is he's kind of getting like a jury. He's kind of getting some of the elders of town, like people that are established in the area, and they're going to be his witnesses. We're going to have a real estate transaction here, and I want you guys to be my witnesses. So he gets 10 of the elders of the town, and they sat down at the town's gate. This would almost be like the municipal court, right? So Then said he to the guardian redeemer. Okay, so Boaz is talking to this next of kin. Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders for my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. And so Boaz, he's the one that kind of initiated this whole thing. He's going to start, Naomi's going to sell her property. This is kind of why they're meeting together. And Boaz is saying, hey, listen, man, you're the guy that's first in line. You can have this. You're the first one in line. Just if you want it, let me know. But if you don't, let me know too, because I would also like to be involved in this. And then so the guy right away, he said, I will redeem it, he said. And then Boaz says, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. So Boaz is basically, it's interesting how he lays out this deal. He says, this is the deal, okay, you can buy this land, you get all of Elimelech's land, but you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, and obviously her mother-in-law Naomi. So not only do you get this great piece of land, but you also get a bitter old mother-in-law, and you get a woman who's from the line of incest, who's not even from our land, who really, because she's not a Jewish woman, he wouldn't even have any obligation to marry her or anything like that. Really, he could, if he wanted to, he could actually make her his slave, if this guardian redeemer did actually buy the land. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself, I cannot do it. So this guy was very motivated by the land. Right away as he said, yeah, I want to buy it. Absolutely, it's a good deal. I want to get in on this. But then he said, but you're also going to get Ruth the Moabite, and you're also going to get Naomi. Okay, now you have an old lady and an immigrant woman to take care of as well. And so he's saying, no, you know what, I don't think so. Because let's say this, if all of a sudden he does have children with Ruth, what he's saying is, I'm going to endanger my own estate. If all of a sudden he has a child with Ruth, then this sort of half-breed, so to speak, is now going to be able to take all his earnings. So he probably already has a wife and children. It doesn't say, but there's a good chance he's married with children. And so any land that this guy has, when he passes away, is going to be passed on to his family. And so now he's thinking, you know what, if I buy this, it'll probably endanger my own estate, so I don't want to do it. And then so Boaz, when he did this, he was totally ready to execute the deal. He's got the money, he had a good harvest, he's got probably cash in hand. He's thinking, you know what, if he doesn't do it, I'm going to be ready to close this deal right away. And so that's what he does. So what it says here, now in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So this is literally how they did a real estate for land. So they'd have the two guys, he's selling his land, say, hey, listen, this is all my property over here, all the way up to that tree, to that wall of rocks down there. Okay, this is all it. We agree on that. The elders can see, this is the land that I'm selling to you. Okay, so he took off his sandal and he gave to him. That's kind of like signing the deal, right? He's like, this is they weren't signing a contract or anything. He's saying, this is going to officiate the deal. So he gave him his sandal. And this is what Boaz says. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. So he's saying, I'm not interested in the deal anymore. I was only motivated by the land. I don't want to also acquire two strange women with that as well. So he was in first position, and now since he's not interested, that makes Boaz now in first position. So he's ready to execute the deal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife. Pay attention to that. In order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometowns. Today you are my witnesses. And Boaz, he's ready. He says, listen, I'm going to buy all the land, but I'm also going to take Ruth the Moabite as my wife. That's a pretty huge statement. He's a Jewish man, very established, very businesslike. It could maybe, in a sense, tarnish his reputation to choose this Moabite woman, but he's found honor in her from the very minute he met her. He's always been interested in her. She fears God. She's an honorable woman, and his main motivation was to actually marry Ruth, not just buy the land of her dead father-in-law. And then so he says to the elders, you guys are my witnesses. I've bought this land. and I've also acquired a wife, and then obviously I'm taking care of Naomi, the mother-in-law, as well. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming unto your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." And so the elders are acknowledging that and say, "Yep, like this is how we're going to start the deal. God bless you." I'm sure they probably get together and they pray for him and saying, may your wife bear many children, and I hope you guys have a really good, fruitful family, and may your family name be famous in all of Bethlehem, right? So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. The Lord enabled her to conceive, and she bare a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, for this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth." Do you guys remember what Naomi was like when she came back from Moab? Everybody knew who she was. What was she like? She was very sad and bitter. Well, rightly so, right? She lost her husband and both her sons. She's had everything taken from her. And all she has with is, maybe what she thinks is a pretty ignorant young girl who just wants to follow her wherever she goes, where she could basically stay back with her family. So she came back and said, "Naomi, you're back." And she's like, "Don't even call me that anymore. The Lord has dealt very bitterly with me." So she's in a pretty broken state. I'm sure she's super sad. But now the women are coming to Naomi and they're saying, sorry, give me a sec here. Yeah, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman... Oh, my bad. And then so the people are saying to Naomi, "So praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer." So they're coming to Naomi and said, "Look, God didn't leave you totally alone." Like she thought that basically God was as far away from her as possible. But they're coming to her and saying, "Look at that. God has not left you without a guardian redeemer." Somebody purchased your husband's estate, and they've now taken on the responsibility of taking care of you and your daughter-in-law. And so it says, and this guy's also going to renew your life and sustain you in your old age. And this is really interesting what it says. It says, "For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons." So that's a really commendable thing. I'm sure the people in the area, they saw that Ruth was completely devoted to her mother-in-law. Her husband was now dead. She really didn't have a desire to go back to her family with their false god and their ways. She wanted to go into this strange land, and she took good care of Ruth. Remember when she had some extra food from work, she would bring it home and she'd feed her mother-in-law too. And so everybody's really encouraged and they're happy right now. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then it talks about the genealogy that goes, because through their son Obed, he's probably David's great-great-great-great-grandfather, for all we know. And then through that, obviously, because Jesus also comes from that line as well. So that's a story there. But one thing I wanted to talk about is God's hand of providence. And so we often see in the Bible, we often hear about these crazy miracles that happen, right? Where Jesus is turning water into wine and people are being raised from the dead and crazy miracles are happening, right? We didn't see a single thing like that in this book. It was a very ordinary. There was nothing extraordinary going. But in the beginning, it was a pretty messy situation. If you guys can remember, it was all because one guy made a bad decision. And who was that? Anybody know? Ruth's husband. It'd be her father-in-law, right? So the going was tough. God had righteous judgment towards the children of Israel because there was a famine in the land. And he's saying, I'm going to withhold provision for you guys for a bit. And he's thinking, you know what? God's nowhere near my family. I'm going to take my family. I'm going to take them out of the land of Bethlehem. I'm going to take them away from God's people, away from God's presence. And I'm going to start up a new life in a foreign land. And that wasn't the right decision to make. So ever since that decision was made, there was a big fallout of things that shouldn't have happened, some pretty terrible things. And so God took that situation and made it into a good one, right? So I heard this really neat illustration the other day. Anybody know what a knitting loom is? No? I'm not going to pretend to be an expert about knitting either. Nothing like that? No, I don't do a whole lot of knitting. I've seen some knitting before. So a knitting loom is kind of like this... It's usually in a circle. It's like a little platform, and they basically knit a design through there, right? And so you can actually, some people are really talented with it, and they can make a really nice looking picture. And so this person used this illustration like these people, they were basically looking at God and thinking, what on earth is your plan here? This is just a mess. There's nothing here that's really going right. And if you look on the underside of a knitting loom, all you're going to see is a kind of jagged edges and knots and different colors, and it doesn't really look anything special, right? Okay, that's what they're looking at it from. But God, he's at the top of that knitting loom, and he's the one that he's weaving and woving a nice, beautiful picture. And so that's exactly how it was. You know, sometimes when our life is going tricky and nothing's really going right, we're looking at like, what on earth is going on here? And we don't really know what God's doing here. But we're not trusting God that he's actually knitting his own beautiful picture in there. And so that's what God did in the story of Ruth. Did you guys like the story of Ruth? Yeah? Any ideas for a story you want to get into next? Like that? Maybe you like the story of Luke? Or the book of Luke? Sure, I'd love to. That's enough for today though, guys, so you guys can go back to your seats.